Hello and welcome everyone to the PMO Virtual Summit. We have an exciting guest with us today, Oliver Yarbrough from Atlanta. Hi, Oliver. How are you?
I'm doing great, Hussein. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. And thank you for being a part of the summit. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Oliver, we're going to be talking about a very important aspect about PMOs. Once you have the PMO ready or feel that there's a need for it, people need to be able to buy what you're selling. And you need to be able to sell the case for the PMO strongly, even before it started, through its creation, and obviously after it's done. And that's what we're going to be talking about, how to sell leadership on the need for a strong PMO. So very excited to have this session with you today, Oliver. Before I hand it over to you, I'd love to go ahead and tell everyone about you.
Okay.
Oliver Yarbrough is an author, speaker, trainer, and leading expert in project management, PMP exam prep, and growth strategies to raise competitiveness. Mr. Yarbrough holds a master's degree from Babson College's F.W. Olin Graduate School of Business, which is, by the way, an MBA program ranked #1 in entrepreneurship for 25 consecutive years by U.S. News and World Report. His professional career includes positions with Fortune 500 companies such as Lucent Technologies, Staples, and Sprint, along with his own successful business ventures. Oliver, welcome again, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Hussein. I'm so glad to be a part of the summit and to share the knowledge I have about strengthening and selling the PMO. So today we're going to talk about, as you mentioned here, how to sell leadership on the need for a strong PMO. These are some of the things that we will be covering today. What is the value of a strong PMO? The pitfalls of not having a PMO, PMO selling strategies, how PMOs can be indispensable, and then we'll briefly talk about some takeaways. So as we start talking about selling the PMO, let's look out into the future. What will the PMO of the future look like? Well, I'm here to tell you the PMO of the future looks a lot like the PMO of today. Although different, there's a lot that's going to still be the same. For example, PMOs will train and develop leaders. PMOs have always trained and developed leaders. They will continue to train and develop leaders. This will just be more of a focus as we move into these different environments, which we'll talk about. PMOs will facilitate and support teams. So in addition to building and developing leaders, PMOs will also help to build and develop teams. And then PMOs will transform organizations. We hear so much about transformation, whether it be business or it be digital or any other type of transformation. PMOs are going to stand in the forefront of transforming organizations from multiple standpoints. So what is the value of a strong PMO? And I do want to put an emphasis on strong, because we can have all types of PMOs, but if we're going to be speaking to the PMO community, we want to be promoting ourselves from a strong standpoint. So when we talk about the value of a strong PMO, it starts with one of our key values is acting as a buffer. And what do I mean by a buffer? A buffer is something that sits in between two or more things to act as a conduit or to act as something so that, for example, the senior leadership doesn't get inundated with every little thing that is happening at the project level, and vice versa. Everything that's happening at the senior leadership level is not being pushed down and inundated onto teams, at least not in a way for which they can handle. So as a strong PMO, PMOs will communicate both up and down, up to senior leadership and down to the project teams. It does not matter what type of environment a PMO is working in, this will remain the same because there will always be a need, particularly as organizations get larger. They will have a need to separate senior leadership and executives from the people who are actually doing the work. And that's where a PMO steps in and provides that buffer. Also, a strong PMO will remove roadblocks, both current roadblocks and roadblocks in the future. This is very important. As we talk about PMOs being a buffer, we need to understand that a PMO will translate, not like they don't already do, but they will continue to translate senior leadership's needs and expectations to the project teams that are actually delivering the work. By doing this, we will show the teams the value and how the work that they do fits into the overall picture that the senior executives and leaders envision. This is very key, and this goes into later on when we talk about how the different teams interrelate. We also need, as I stated earlier, need to be cognizant of the teams and their feedback, particularly as organizations speed up and need to deliver results faster. We need to take that feedback in an orderly fashion from the teams and deliver it to the appropriate parties in order to drive action. If there are roadblocks or things that are stopping action, we need to step in and remove them in order to continue to drive action. Continuous results. That's what I'm talking about. Furthermore, number 2, PMOs, strong PMOs will monitor progress. Even in this world, as we get faster and faster and we start to see more and more self-managed teams and organizations using more adaptive approaches, we still need to have a body that monitors progress. Now, with progress being monitored, that does not mean the PMO needs to jump in and save teams or get hands-on or get involved at a granular level. Simply means that we are being the eyes or the eagle eyes overlooking everything. And as long as things are going as expected, things are going smooth within certain expectations, we're fine. Even if they start to slightly get out of line, we still don't necessarily jump in. But if we see things are going way off course, or there is a need for leadership or someone to step in and offer guidance, that's where, from a monitoring standpoint, PMOs can really add value. Because no, we don't want to stop progress and we don't want to impede whatever they're doing, but we do want to be that guide. We do want to shine the light that keeps them on the right path. And that's why monitoring progress is so important. Holding ourselves, holding our teams accountable for results. And by doing that, we can start to learn and improve over time, thus reducing risks as well as waste. That's the whole lean aspect of a PMOs. Number 3, facilitate project outcomes. This is one of the most important aspects of a PMO, and it doesn't matter what type of environment we're in. We need to be cognizant that our job is to facilitate the outcomes that will deliver the results that the customer, that leadership expects. We do this in a variety of ways, not the least being cross-pollinating ideas and best practices. What do I mean? When we cross-pollinate ideas and best practices, we take what might be working with one team and we cross-pollinate it just like a bee over to another team. Once we see that something's working across multiple teams, we can then deem that to be a best practice. That does not mean we necessarily force that on every single team, because teams need to be adaptive enough to be able to use whatever approach will help them achieve the objective of that project or that deliverable as they're working on it. But now they have a resource, a repository to be able to reference, to be able to help them accomplish their work. This is very effective in the sense that it ensures effectiveness and efficient delivery. What happens here is as we start to learn, improve, test, and monitor, we get a sense of what works better in one aspect than another. And by doing that, we then over time start to improve efficiencies and our effectiveness. This goes back also to number 2, in that we are reducing risks and wastes. So this is all interrelated. It's not like anything is happening in a silo. All these things are integrated. But once we start getting good at this and we start recognizing the strengths of different teams, we can then, as I stated, take these and spread this knowledge across other teams. Some of the questions we can ask as we're doing this, as we're showing our value or really putting ourselves forward. Does the PMO reduce friction? Are we reducing friction? For example, are we cutting administrative tasks? Are we helping our teams take action? Anything that causes friction. Some may call it roadblocks. I even look at a friction even above and beyond a roadblock. A roadblock can be very specific, but friction may not be something that we can always put our finger on, but we know it's there. We know it's impeding progress, and it's our job to remove that friction, or if we can't totally remove it, reduce it. The next question here, does the PMO improve communications? We talked about communicating up and down, but are we actually offering different techniques or different practices to help facilitate that communication? That's something else we need to think about from a strong PMO standpoint. Next, does the PMO help improve overall satisfaction? Satisfaction is key because we aren't just producing work and deliverables just to do that. We're ultimately doing this to have satisfaction, because satisfaction increases growth and longevity. So are we helping to improve overall satisfaction? And finally, does the PMO improve consistency across projects? For example, are success criteria being met or being met holistically across multiple projects? If we see a pattern where that's not happening, then that's a problem that we need to address. We can't expect some hits and misses. Everything won't go perfect. But holistically, we should be seeing progress moving forward. That's another value we bring as a PMO. Without agreed upon goals and an integrative structure and clear guidelines, projects can become disconnected, convoluted, and lose their effectiveness over time. A strong PMO can prevent this from happening while proactively championing the right behaviors and outcomes. So before we get into selling strategies, we talked about the value of a strong PMO. Let's talk about some of the pitfalls of not having a PMO. How many times have we heard, "Oh, a PMO is just overhead"? In a hybrid or adaptive environment, there's not a need for a PMO because a PMO is controlling. This controlling PMO, ooh, boogeyman bad. But in reality, a PMO is adaptive and always has been adaptive. PMO was never just a controlling entity. Yes, there was some control involved, or maybe we call it management because it is a project management office. But at the end of the day, we are here as a PMO to facilitate progress. If that requires us to be a little more hands-on or controlling, as some might call it, so be it. If it requires us to be more hands-off and to facilitate, then so be it. But we should not get caught in this paradigm where we have to choose either or. I wanted to state that up front as we start talking about some of these pitfalls, because we don't want to be in a position of weakness when we're talking to management and get caught in this thing where we somehow have to water ourselves down and we lose our focus. We are always there to support our teams. We are always there to remove roadblocks and to communicate with upper management. So let's talk now about some of these pitfalls. When we do not have a PMO or a strong PMO, these are some of the things we find. We find that organizations lack project planning guidance. You know, every project is new and we just jump in and do what we do, and there's no real guidance. And things just sort of meander along, and we have hits and misses. There is some thought, or there needs to be some thought to how projects are planned out from a holistic level, not a granular level, but from a holistic level. When we lack or we don't have a PMO, we lack that guidance on planning. Number two here, when organizations do not have a PMO, they lack an efficient and effective way to manage resource utilization and allocation. So are we optimizing the resources we have on our project? Of course, we're utilizing them, but are we optimizing them? And when I talk about a resource, I'm talking about human resources, I'm talking about software, whatever it might be. This goes back to the lean aspect of management. Are we squeezing out inefficiencies so that we get optimal output? When we lack a strong PMO, we don't get that. Next up, number three, if you're keeping count. Without a strong PMO, we lack project reviews and measurement. We have no way to really track progress at a holistic level. Yes, on a granular project by project basis, or if we're in an agile world, sprint basis, yes, that's being tracked. But how is this fitting into the overall picture? Who is monitoring that? Who's helping to make sure that everything's staying on track? If you don't have an organization there, that's left to the individual teams, which they're concerned with the individual work they're doing as a team, not necessarily how it fits into the broader picture. Number four, when we don't have a strong PMO, organizations lack thorough training and development. We can, brush this off as just like, oh, well, everybody, is responsible for themselves. But there is an argument to be made for teams needing guidance from a higher level and getting team-based training. Yes, we are each individually responsible for ourselves and getting the training we individually need by either raising our hand, or if we're struggling with something, asking for mentoring or coaching. But from a team or a collective standpoint, there is a need for a body, namely a PMO, to facilitate that, to recognize that training needs to be done and to go ahead and bring it about. If we lack a PMO, who handles that? Who funds that? Who supports that? And then number five here. When we do not have a strong PMO, we lack a lessons learned repository. I know as we get into these adaptive approaches, there's this need for speed. And some people think speed means that we don't document things, we don't keep track of what's happened. How do we learn? How do we spread that knowledge? As I stated earlier, how do we spread those ideas and best practices from one team to another? Why do we always have to constantly recreate the wheel every time we go into a new project or we start down a new path? Even if we're doing something completely new, there's still lessons learned that can be utilized from previous projects. That's where a strong PMO comes in. We hold that. We manage that repository so it has the latest and greatest in it. It reduces time, it reduces waste, it reduces risk. All of the things that we expect from a strong PMO. When we don't have that, we lack that cohesiveness. We lack that repository. Here's some additional reasons organizations should consider a PMO if they don't have one. Projects tend to go over budget or fall behind schedule. This is just natural, but a strong PMO can help to reduce that likelihood. Also, projects aren't aligned with the organization's goals. I mean, even the best intentions, if they're not properly guided or facilitated, things can get off track very quickly. Also, project progress isn't regularly being communicated to senior leadership. If senior leadership has to ask what's going on, what's the status of our projects, what do our deliverables look like? If the customer or senior leadership or anybody really has to, that means there's a lack of management involved there. There's a lack of oversight, not from a controlling standpoint, but just from a standpoint of what's going on. What am I paying for? Yes, I'm getting deliverables, but how is this really impacting the overall goal? Again, we do not want to miss the forest for the trees. There's so much emphasis on speed and focusing on the trees, getting the work done at a granular level, that sometimes we overlook the forest, particularly if our projects span a number of years. Also, something else that organizations that lack PMOs should think about are, there are few, if any, standardized procedures, tools, or resources. Again, every project starts from a scratch, and that's what we want to avoid. And then project success is a moving target and hard to measure. For organizations that do not have a PMO, I don't know about you, but shooting at a moving target can be very difficult. If it's necessary, it's one thing, but we should not make this a practice, or if we can reduce it, that's better. There's nothing wrong with wanting to reduce friction, wanting to predict as much as possible. Everything in life cannot be predicted, but there are some things that can be. For those things that can be, we need to do that. So again, closing this pitfalls section out here, we should not look at a PMO as controlling or it's being more free-flowing. We should look at a PMO as doing what's necessary to produce results and meet expectations. If it requires more hands-on, so be it. If it requires more hands-off, so be it. But we're always there. We're always that guide shining that flashlight down a dark path so everyone keeps going down the right path. PMO selling strategies. This is what you really want to know, right? How do I sell this to senior leadership? How do I get them engaged? How do I make sure that they keep funding me and keep listening to me and keep, wanting to know and appreciate? It's about appreciation. We want our leaders and executives and our customers and our teams to respect us, to value us, and to really want to hear what we have to say ultimately. So let's talk about some of these strategies here, okay? Some of the strategies here involve, asking questions that uncover pain and generate interest. These are age-old principles to gaining interest and getting buy-in. Where there is no pain, there is no gain. Where there is no pain, there is no gain. If I'm doing fine without a PMO, it's going to be very difficult for you or anyone else to sell somebody on why they need something. If everything's going great, if they're meeting their numbers and growth is just through the roof, I don't need you. I'm fine. I mean, yeah, we may be able to sell them on, well, I know you're doing great, but I can help you do better. I mean, there is an argument that can be made, but it's going to be a lot tougher. But most times I've found that most organizations, whether they're growing fast or not, they do have a need for a PMO because they have some level of pain. Something isn't going as well as they would have expected. And in order to get to that level, we have to ask better questions. We cannot assume. We get into trouble when we assume. And when we assume, if we assume wrong, we may not get a second chance to sell them on the value of a PMO or why they should continue to fund us. So we ask questions to uncover that pain, and then we generate interest by poking at that and really understanding it better so that we can then start to position our argument in a way later on to help to alleviate that pain. It starts by, if we already are in a PMO and we're not selling a new PMO, we should already be showing value, and we should be doing it early and often. So we can leverage the value we've already shown to then hopefully continue to get funded, but to grow. Because as organizations grow and continue to win business, they will need more project managers and more teams to implement that and get it kicked off. And that's the beautiful thing about growth. It becomes that snowball rolling downhill, building up momentum as it brings others along with it. When the waters rise, everything rises with it. So again, show value early and often, and then use that to then roll into our third point here about providing examples. If we've shown value early and often, we can then use those wins as examples to help us sell additional value to our stakeholders. And understand this aspect of selling. I use the word selling, but it's marketing, selling. I'm sort of integrating them all, even though they are technically separate disciplines. But when we talk about selling, we're not just selling up. We're not just selling to the executives. We're really hitting three different entities. We're selling the value to senior leadership and executives. We're also selling our value to our teams. And we're also selling our value to our customers or the end users. All three of them need to feel we are adding value, or we leave room for discontent, and a breakdown could occur over time. So we need to be cognizant of that, and we need to be making sure that each of those entities is being fulfilled to the extent necessary. We do this by positioning ourselves as a strategic asset. A strategic asset is not a tactical asset. It's an asset that is integral to the success of the overall organization. I've stated many times, I believe that project management and project managers and their teams are a competitive advantage for progressive organizations. I'll state that again. Project managers and their teams and project management in general, if properly deployed, is a competitive advantage for growth-oriented as well as other organizations. If we hold that to be true, and that's a whole nother conversation on why, but that is true. If we hold that to be true and evident, then we should be saying that a PMO is a strategic asset. Because if the project managers and their teams and project management in general is a competitive advantage, someone needs to harness that advantage and maximize it, optimize it. That is the value, or one of the selling points, a key selling point of a PMO. That should not be underestimated. Next up. When we're selling it, we need to sell the PMO as promoting a culture of innovation. Innovation is not just innovation in technology. A lot of us associate innovation with technology. That is part of innovation. But when we talk about innovation, we're also talking about innovation of techniques and tools and practices. Innovating culture, taking us, if we're in a traditional environment, maybe moving them to a hybrid environment or an adaptive environment or whatever it might be. That's innovating in its own way. If we're not using a lot of automation or tools, maybe we need to introduce that. That's a selling technique. Using the latest and greatest, getting people into the future. That's a selling technique. Because anything that reduces costs or increases output or increases income or revenue, that is innovative. Now, innovation just for innovation's sake is pointless. If we're innovating to, again, reduce expenses, increase revenue, get greater output, improve chances of success, then by all means, innovation is a wonderful thing. Next up, we should present measurable results. Senior leadership, customers, they aren't interested in, we did this and we did that. They want the hard numbers. They want you to be able to show them, what have we done and how does this impact the bottom line? Have we squeezed out inefficiencies? If so, by what percentage? Versus last year, what percent of our projects are coming in, within the agreed upon expectations? So get a little bit more granular on your measurable results. Then be relatable to management. We have to put ourselves in the shoes of decision makers, whether they be within our organization or on the customer site. Can we relate to whatever they're going through? And the closer we can relate to whatever they're going through, the better it's going to be for us and whatever we're trying to sell them. Because if we can connect whatever they're going through with the projects and the different things we manage in the organization, and if we can connect that, we can make a stronger argument. That aspect of being able to walk in another person's shoes, that's something that a lot of us are good at, but some of us can get better at. And then the last point I have here is aligning with corporate objectives. We've talked about this in different ways and whatnot, expectations and the mission and vision, but really getting into the objectives. I mean, are we aligning our projects with the objectives? That's a huge value, because teams individually cannot do that on their own. They don't care about the other teams next door as much as they care about getting the work done, especially in these adaptive cultures and whatnot. They are concerned with getting work done themselves within a matter of weeks. They are so driven to get work done, somebody needs to be looking out in the future and seeing, how is this impacting the overall objectives? If we can sell leadership on the need to have someone who's not just a buffer. We're not just a buffer here. We're actually keeping things aligned. And we are reducing the stress on you, Mr. and Mrs. Senior Leader. You can rest peacefully at night knowing that we have this. We have everything, not necessarily under control, because I don't want to make it seem like we always have to be under maximum control. but somebody needs to be manning the ship while the folks, on board or under the deck are, moving chairs around and cooking and cleaning and doing all the things it takes to keep the ship going. Somebody up top needs to be making sure, hey, there's no icebergs above, ahead, and we're moving in the right direction, and that the people who are funding us are getting what they need. That's what that's what I mean there. A few more things here. Selling to senior leadership, we need to then, as projects grow, PMOs, can reduce the risk of project overload. This is, resources not being properly allocated. Again, this is what we're selling our leadership here. We can keep an optimal balance, an optimal workload for our projects so that our existing projects don't get overloaded and we don't have too many projects going on at the same time that are overlapping. That causes waste and that increases risk. We need to really sell them and tell them and point and put a spotlight on that. And then it's the PMO's job to understand how each project helps to achieve the overall goal. We're moving chess pieces on the board here. Each piece represents something very specific that's being moved or done in order to achieve a greater goal or objective. We need to make sure we are telling them, explaining that, and that senior leadership understands that, because we assume that. We cannot assume that senior leadership understands that or even cares. It's our job, again, to put a spotlight on it so that they not just know about it, they understand it, and better yet, appreciate it. And when they appreciate it, that's when we know we have achieved our goal. Because appreciation, people don't get rid of people or organizations or entities when they appreciate them. I may like you. I may think you are doing a great job, but if I don't really appreciate you, I'm not going to keep you. But when I appreciate you, I will definitely keep you. And not only will I keep you, I will help you do your job better and give you what you need to succeed. So let's move in and talk about how PMOs can be indispensable. We built this thing up now. We've talked about how we are valuable. We talked about the pitfalls of not having a PMO. We talked about how to sell a PMO to senior leadership. But how do we make ourselves indispensable? Indispensable means the organization, almost to a point they can't function without us. Now, yes, I know that sounds like hype to a certain extent. I mean, all of us are expendable. Every organization can work around you, and there's other ways to accomplish these same goals. But how can we, really I'm talking about here, how can we position ourselves that we are a necessity, that our leaders and customers and teams can't even imagine doing work without us? Like, I don't know what I would do if I didn't have this organization to look to for XYZ. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, so with that, let's talk about these. Number one, transform organizations. I mentioned this earlier. Transformation is a big word now. Transformation, digital, business, all these transformations. What exactly is this? We're dealing with change, right? Change is painful. Most people don't embrace change. Most people try to avoid it. So how do we get people not just to, not avoid it, but actually embrace it? We have to influence the mindset, the values, and the culture. We have to influence the mindset, values, and culture. It doesn't matter what type of environment we're in. We need to make sure we are standing at the forefront of moving the organization forward. And it starts with influencing the mind, the value, and the culture. If we don't control them, we have to influence them. And some might argue, and I would argue as well, even if you do have a certain amount of control, it's still better to influence, because then you get people and organizations to do things because they want to, not because they have to. When we talk about transformation, we're talking about harnessing technology, tools and techniques. When we talk about technology, think about automation and all the different things that are coming out of that. We have to be forward thinkers, future thinkers. We have to look out into the future, see what the future is going to look like, and bring it back to the present. That's how we can harness it. We have to know where it's going, and we have to prepare our teams, our organizations to deal with it, to optimize it and maximize it. Okay? I could talk so much more about transformation, but we've all worked in organizations that have dealt with a tremendous amount of change. Transformation is changing the entire way an organization operates. There's the status quo, and then there's the way going forward. And transformation happens in between. It merges them. It brings you from the status quo into where they need to be. And we as PMOs, as PMO leaders, need to lead that charge. Number two, think holistically. Think holistically. What do I mean by think holistically? We need to bring order to chaos. We talked about pitfalls. When you don't have a strong PMO, what happens? You have chaos at some level. Now, if it's a small organization, if it's a small team or project inside of a larger organization, yeah, I mean, maybe they don't need a PMO. But I'm not talking about these small mom and pop shops. I'm not talking about small teams or groups inside of larger companies. I'm talking about large organizations or growing entities, even if they aren't large, growing entities that are doing a lot of projects. Because if you're not doing a lot of projects and you don't have a lot of stuff to manage at a higher level, then maybe there's an argument you don't need a PMO right now. But those aren't the kind of organizations and people we're talking about here. You are in an organization where a lot is going on. There's a lot of chaos. Even if it's organized chaos, it's still chaos. There can be a strong force, not from a controlling standpoint, but from bringing order to chaos. So just like project managers bring order to chaos, that's what PMOs do at a holistic level. PMOs bring order to madness, order to get everyone aligned towards a common goal. And as I stated earlier, senior leadership and executives, the customer, and the teams get them all aligned towards an agreed upon goal. That is organization bliss right there. Also, we need to embrace integrative approaches. When I talk about integrative approaches, a lot of times we're working within matrix environments because very few of us work in a projectized environments or even functional. A lot of us work in matrix environments. It really requires a lot of soft skills. It really requires a more integrative approach. Because in hybrid environments particularly, we may have to deal with different methodologies and different approaches to delivering project results. There will be training opportunities because everyone will not be on the same page. There will be opportunities for, again, adapting culture, adapting mindset, and focusing everybody on what is the best way for us to accomplish this goal or meet expectations. That's really what it comes down to. And we need to, as leaders, embrace integrative approaches, but we also need to get the buy-in from all of the other stakeholders, in that as well. And we need to bring it all together so it makes sense. And then number three here, develop leaders. We need to get good at developing leaders. I stated this at the beginning, and I'll state it again here. Developing leaders will be crucial for PMOs of the future, particularly as organizations get flatter, they squeeze out inefficiencies, teams become more self-managed. You may have a self-managed team, but guess what? Everybody needs a leader. Whether that leader has a title or not does not matter. Every team has a de facto leader, whether official or not. There is a leader. It's our job to recognize the people who have the potential to lead and to empower them. Make the good great. Recognize that person and lift them up. And we can do that by facilitating training and development. As I stated earlier, leaders need to be polished. You maybe have a natural leader, but that person needs to be polished and needs to constantly be encouraged and empowered to be the best version of themselves. And being a good leader requires flexibility, because there will be times, even in an adaptive environment or agile environment or whatever environment it might be, there will still be a need for someone to step up and take charge. I don't care what kind of environment it is, there will be times where things will hit an impasse and someone will need to step up and take charge. We need to harness that type of thinking, that leadership capability, and give these people what they need in order to succeed. So a few of the points I want to make before we move on and begin wrapping up here. When we talk about being indispensable, we want to really touch again upon these new technologies. New technologies such as automation and advanced reporting. We need to start thinking into the future as PMOs and as we're selling and getting all of our stakeholders engaged. Where is this automation going? We need to be in the forefront of leveraging new technologies, which are basically tools, to increase efficiency. That's what we ultimately need to be doing in regards to technology, seeing how we can use it in order to help our teams be more efficient and effective. We need to see how these tools can help us get real-time insights and deliver results faster. Use it to get real-time insights to deliver results faster. Again, we're not just embarking on this path just for the sake of doing it. We're doing it to either, again, reduce expenses at some level, to increase revenue, or to increase productivity, or hopefully all three at some level. We need to adopt an adaptive hybrid approach. A lot of environments are moving away from traditional into more, again, hybrid and adaptive environments. We need to be in the forefront of that and figuring out how we can lead that charge instead of being reactive in addressing it. This is, again, how we become indispensable. We're at the forefront of it. Transitioning organizations and teams, from, again, traditional maybe to a hybrid, or hybrid to an adaptive, or some combination of all three of them. But we need to look at that and see, how can we best deliver results? And do we need to introduce a new approach even when it's not being called for? A lot of us think about we're being dragged into this or having to deal with this after the fact, or some mandate comes down. Why don't we be the leader in that? And then we get to have a seat at the table when the new approaches are being discussed. Don't wait for it to happen. Don't be Apple. Well, no, be Apple when they had the iPods and they were the leaders in music, and they basically, reduced or scaled back their leader in order to push forward with the iPhone. We want to be leaders in pushing forward our own iPhones, even at the expense of curtailing some of the things that are already working well for us. We have to be leaders, not just followers. Harness, again, cutting edge technology, automation, promote it, support it, and use it to improve projects. Then advocate for our project managers and teams. And above all, be flexible. Don't get set in our ways. Don't be married to the status quo. Remain flexible. Balance the need for innovation with the need for stability. That can be done. It must be done. It's our job to make it happen. Not only provide strategy, but understand how to execute on it. and understand how new technologies and systems such as artificial intelligence can and will affect teams and the work they perform. These are all the things that help to make us indispensable. All right, let's talk about some key takeaways. As we wrap things up, let's talk about some key takeaways. PMOs deliver value. So when you're sitting across the table from senior leaders or the customer or even your teams, and they're really questioning you, you feel like I have to explain to them what I do and how I create value. Yeah, we talked about earlier, but let's really get down to the nitty-gritty here. We produce value by integrating projects and resources, by improving alignment with objectives, by championing team productivity, by increasing success and reducing failure. And last but not least here, gaining customer satisfaction. I really could have said gaining stakeholder satisfaction in general, but there's a huge focus now on customers because we are in a customer-driven environment. And so with being in a customer-driven environment, appealing to and giving customers what they need quicker, we need to make sure we have a focus on gaining customer satisfaction because that entails future business. Because maybe I get what I want, but I'm not satisfied, I'm not happy, that's a problem. Yeah, I know it sounds crazy, right? I got what I want, but I'm still not happy. And that's for a whole nother conversation. How can somebody get what they want, but still not be happy? But it's our job to make sure that we're not just giving our customers what they want. We're making sure that what they want is what they need and that they're satisfied. Okay? So at the end of the day, the main goal is to demonstrate consistent value. And if we are consistently delivering value by doing all of the things I've mentioned here, and properly positioning ourselves in the forefront of change and transformation, we will be able to sell our value and position to all of our stakeholders and be able to grow with the organization and be at the forefront of progress for our teams, our organizations, our customers, and society as a whole. With that being said, I want to thank you. It's been a pleasure. And I believe now we're going to open it up for questions and answers. And just before here, feel free to contact me at any of the given addresses here, such as the email, website, LinkedIn. I'm very big on LinkedIn, so definitely connect with me on LinkedIn if you're not already. And then Twitter, I do share useful information on Twitter. And if you want my long form posts, I have most of them on LinkedIn, but I have all of them, at least most of them, on Medium as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That was a wonderful and powerful presentation, Oliver. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
What I want to do is definitely go ahead and get the Q&A started.
Okay.
One question that I had was, I know you mentioned stakeholders at the, towards the end of the presentation, but the majority of the presentation was all about selling the PMO to the leaders of the organization. So my question is, how can we translate some of these strategies to sell the PMO to the project managers and other stakeholders within the organization?
Great question. One thing I found to be true, whether it be project managers or stakeholders in general, is, do you understand or can you address what's in it for me? And this is age old. I'm not going to act like I invented this, but what's in it for me? Call it the WIFM. And if I can, most of us have come from a project management background, so we understand what it means to be a project manager. We understand the challenges that project managers go through. We also, most of us have been a member of teams when we weren't the manager, and what we wanted or what we would have liked to have seen. So as much as we can step into that other person or that team's shoes and look at it from their standpoint, that can help us to translate those strategies and in essence, sell them on why they should get on board with this. So again, it's standing, in their shoes, looking out for their interests, and then translating, the strategies of, whatever we talked about with the leadership, translating that into terms that can benefit the actual individuals and people who are working on or in the project.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, that whole what's in it for me or what's in it for you, that piece is so critical. And I think that's one of the most difficult things for people to do in general, right? Whatever situation that they're in, it's difficult to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And I mean, that's a trait that is so powerful, a skill that it, comes with a lot of practice. And so I think just having that thing in mind consciously helps a lot. So makes a lot of sense, Oliver. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Oliver, I think that's all the question and answers that we had for our session today. Any final words for the audience before we head out?
Any final words? I would say in closing, PMOs, I do not buy into these fads or into different gurus stating that it's the death of the PMO or the PMOs won't be as needed in adaptive or hybrid environments. I think that we have always adapted. We have always found a way to add value. I do not think that anything from that standpoint will change. It's just that we need to be leaders, be proactive, and instead of waiting for change or waiting for teams or management to come out and say, well, what about this adaptive or agile or whatever else it might be? Why don't we address it, bring it to their attention, and then that way we have a seat at the table to help decide the direction the organization goes in, instead of being reactive, having to explain why we should be there. So that's my last and final words. And, I wish everyone much success going forward. Okay.
Thank you so much once again, Oliver, for being a part of this summit. We really appreciate having you here. And for everyone who's watching and listening to us right now, you have to go check out Oliver's courses on LinkedIn Learning. There are ton of value that you can unlock and things that you can learn while accessing his course, which is, not just a course, but multiple courses, which you can find on linkedin.com/learning/instructors/Oliver-Yarbrough. Thanks once again, Oliver, for being a part of the summit. Take care.